name is Judy Steinman. I want to welcome everybody to the, I guess I can't take this off, the Hilo Hamakua Community Development Corporation's second series of presentations on TMT and Mauna Kea, Common Ground. I'm a board member. We have our president here tonight, Donna Johnson. We have several of our other board members. Eric Weinert is here, Richard Haas is here, Gerald DeMello, who you'll hear from in a minute. I believe I saw Jason Moniz here. Glenn Carvalho is not able to be with us tonight. He's with family, but we all welcome you to this series of events. It's a very exciting and great opportunity for us to all come together and find what common ground we do have regarding the Mauna. So Jeff Melrose is here tonight. He is going to be our evening's facilitator, and he is going to be introducing each of our speakers. Just a few housekeeping things before Jeff comes up. We have cards in the back that look like this, and pens in the back. If you have questions, please write your questions down. The process is going to be each speaker that you can make. So thank you for bringing your aloha here tonight. I welcome everybody, and I really, really look forward to the experience that we'll have together.
So thank you, Judy, and I just want to start off by acknowledging the role that the Hilo Hamakua Community Development Corporation plays generally in this community, but also in this specific circumstance. One of the things I've observed over the years watching this organization and its member groups is that they have made a really solid effort to create forum for conversation as opposed to be the point of the spear. And I think as a community organization, being able to be committed to that forum creating and exchanging is just a fundamental need in every community, and it certainly helps our rural communities communicate with each other in some new and useful ways. So I'd like to start the evening with a pule just to kind of settle us down and put us in a mindful way. And Herring Kalua agreed to, we drafted him for that purpose. So Herring, would you come and give us a thought to start us off? Thank you.
I have all your attention, and I'm going to seek a prayer, and I ask everybody just to listen and understand. Our Father, gracious Heavenly Father, as we come before Thee in this part of the meeting, in this center, we are thankful for the opportunity which has been given to everyone to come and share their concern with one another. And we also ask Thee to bless those who are on the way here, they will be guided safely. And we also ask Thee that we can have Thy Spirit to be with us, that whatever we say, whatever we do, you be in of righteousness. And again, we're thankful for all the things and the opportunity which has been given to me to say grace here, to say prayer, and also bless the desserts or whatever they have that will give us healthy strength and nourishment to our bodies. And bless those who will be speaking, that we all can understand. And again, I'm thankful for the opportunity which has been asked of me to sit in prayer here tonight. And I say all these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Herring. A couple of things. Our meeting we've kind of sorted out some new pieces of the meeting just as we came into the meeting tonight. So the arrangement and the speakers are a little different than they were publicized, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the purpose of the conversation, as was on the screen a minute ago, was to provide insight and not to incite. Does that make sense? not to incite activity here today, but to provide insight to us all on this conversation. So, and I'm going to try and hold us to that. I'm an active facilitator, and I hope I can just get everybody's agreement to be respectful of one another, to wait till your other people have had a chance to talk, and I will pass the opportunity to talk around so everybody gets a chance to talk, and that we give each other's respect and aloha as we proceed here. So as Judy said, there are written notes, and please think through your ideas and thoughts, and we'll try our best to get them addressed tonight. Originally tonight, Paul Nevis was going to address this group. Paul called today with a second thought on that topic, and partly because Paul's involved in a litigation that's active related to the summit, and felt that that was probably could put him, particularly with people taping and the like, it may end up being a compromise. So he chose not to be here tonight, so we've had to kind of hustle with that. We do have two members of the Hawaiian community who have agreed to step up, and they will come last in the event because they asked to be so they could kind of listen and think through. They didn't really come prepared, but they're ready to share them enough. So I thank you both, Hawani and Bruce, for your willingness to step up and share with us today. God bless you for jumping in. Good for you. So I want to start the evening with Peter Adler. Peter is personally somebody I've known for 30 or 40 years. What's that?
Gerald's doing an introduction.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gerald DeMello is going to set some context for us. I'm sorry, I missed that. And so Gerald is the member of the board of HHCDC. So credit. Sorry.
Thank you, Jeff. As you came in, you may have seen a handout at the table. It's kind of like an overview. It's how and when and how we got to where we are right now. It's going to be 60 years of history. They gave you 6 minutes, so we'll skirt through that. But I'm Gerald. DeMello has been introduced. And I just wanted to start with a sense for place. When we talk about Hilo in 1960, the town was 30,000. The island had 60,000. You talk about the Big Island today, it has 181,000. De facto population any given day with visitors on the island, maybe a little over 200,000. And if you bring Puna in to Hilo now, which back then Puna as a population was nearly non-existent, you have a town of about 80,000. But when you look at the timeline that I put forth, and I tried to be as accurate as I could, and I selected different references to pull this paper together. I may have missed some things along the way, but this gives you a thumbnail sketch over the last 60 years. But basically, we go back to May 22nd, 1960, and there was just a memorial service the other day at the clock in Waikea celebrating the tsunami of 1960. But basically, that tsunami literally flattened downtown Hilo. We were in high school then. Harry Kolo was at Waikea. His school was gone. Some of us were at Hilo High and Hilo Intermediate, and we were out of school for about a week. Many of our parents lost jobs. I know my father had his workplace completely displaced, and many people had to leave the island. It was a real desperate kind of time. So basically 60 people lost lives, classmates, family, you name it. But the homes were gone, jobs were gone, and the town was a wasteland. So basically, what was the town's future back then? And the fundamental character and spirit of Hilo back then, when you go back and read old newspapers, we're going to rebuild and we're going to seek new economic initiatives. So the mainstay, of course, was sugar, and they looked for other types of agriculture initiatives, but one of which that came to play, an economic possibility, was astronomy and Mauna Kea. So in 1963, you have a lot of letters. If you go and look at a book by Kumo Pono Associates, he writes about this part. And we look for opportunities. There's Mitsu Akiyama, guy by the name of Howard Ellis, who works over at Mauna Loa, and he sees Mauna Kea in the evening. It's always very clear. So he begins to talk business with the business community, and what they do is put forth the idea of Mauna Kea as a potential site. And they looked at Mauna Kea and astronomy, which was non-existent, as a place where you can get direct and indirect job creation. So they write to a lot of universities, as I know, that would be interested in Mauna Kea as a site. As I recall, over 100 letters, but pretty much one or two were answered. And in 1964, an astronomer by the name of Gerald Kuiper and Alika Herring, they come and they tour Mauna Kea. Now, Alika Herring went all over the world looking at potential sites. That was his thing, along with Kuiper. And he writes in a report that Mauna Kea is the best site he's ever experienced. And that's documented on the area History Mauna Kea Astronomy Outreach Committee. And interestingly enough, Alika Herring was part Hawaiian, not from this island, but part Hawaiian. And in 1964, the Board of Supervisors, today we would call it Hawaii County Council, they passed Resolution 361, and they're calling upon the governor, they're calling upon the congressional delegation to facilitate road construction, to do whatever they need to do to use Mauna Kea for studies, to move it forward. And in 1968, Governor Burns wants an economic boost for the island, so he appropriates money to the legislature and a road is built. And the road is built for access to do site testing. So again, Mauna Kea becomes confirmed as an excellent site for astronomy. So you move in that way. And then after roughly 68, you go through the 70s. And I just kind of listed from 79 to 1990, all these different telescopes have come in. Canada, France, United Kingdom, Caltech, Keck 1, Keck 2, Subaru, Gemini. The list is there, so I won't get detailed. But basically, you know, they came in, they assumed the risk, they assumed the capital, they put it on. And then, roughly about the 90s, people get a little incensed about the way things are going in the mountain. There's no monitoring, there's no management, there's opala all over the place, construction crews go up, stuff all over. And so the oversight is taken from Oahu, it's brought back to the Big Island, and you begin Mauna Kea management. And as a result, you know, you have community-based management, which includes participation from the Hawaiian community, the business community, and there's what they call the adoption of the CMP, the Comprehensive Management Plan, which the court says you must do. How are you going to manage? What are you going to do? And so basically, what happens then in June of 2000, you have the auditor come in and say, no good the way things are being done. You need to do a master plan. You need to look at sites that are identifiable for astronomical development. You need to look at building sites. You need to hire rangers, guides. You need to control the thrash. And you need to form for continuous public input as to where things are going to go. And you need rules for managing public access. So that comes into play. And then you have the Mauna Kea Management Board, people, I think there's 7 members, business community, cultural community, recreational community, and then they had a volunteer group called Kahukumana Council, which was made up of people from the Hawaiian community. So you have that moving forward. Then in June, we move forward to the year 2010. Roughly, Mauna Kea Management recommends to the border regions to improve the TMT telescope. The governor approves the final EIS for the TMT project. The border regions approves the TMT project. Then there's Act 132, which says you need administrative rules for this mountain, and the site and the access road, and who goes up, and you need to account for safety when the weather is bad. So all of that comes into play. And then 2010, DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources, hosts public meetings in Hilo and in Kona on TMT. And the Board of Land and Natural Resources grants a UH Conservation District permit to build TMT. Immediately, there's a contested case hearing that's triggered. And the permit is put on hold until conclusion of the contested case. In April, the contested case commences. In December of 2012, the hearing officer receives findings of facts and conclusions of law from UH and petitioners on the review of the final report that goes to the Board of Land and Natural Resources. In November of 2013, the hearing officer submits his final findings of fact and conclusions to the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Board of Land and Natural Resources in April of 2014 issues a final decision granting UH a permit to build TMT on Mauna Kea. Again, in May 2014, petitioners filed an appeal with the Circuit Court. So, and somewhere throughout all of this, someone pointed out to me last time that there was a judge's decision on KEC, on the Outreach project, that would have significant impact on the mountain. So I want to address that. That was also, I tried to look up the proper date, but I couldn't get a date, but that was significant as well. And so, what I want to get at, the initial efforts of Ms. Akinola, who was a pioneer in this field, and Howard Ellis in the 1960s, they saw astronomy on Mauna Kea as a means to improve the quality of life of future generations. In effect, to make Hawaii a better place. That was their thinking. When you read the old accounts, that comes back and forth. Workforce development. And I want to just read something that Mitt says in a news article. I kind of clipped that. In 1991, when he was in his 80s, he was interviewed. And the Hawaii Tribune Herald published an interview with he and his wife regarding the early days of astronomy on Mauna Kea. Through the interview, Mr. Akiyama candid observations. We learned of the events that led to his first telescope and the efforts to ensure development of the science complex on the summit of Mauna Kea would occur. In those early years, the dream met with no opposition, and what was really centered, again, is what I said earlier when I opened up my comments. A town of 30,000, an island of 60,000, they were looking for a mechanism for economic development. So, passionately, they moved forward on it. Now, Mitz's idea was a science city up on Mauna Kea. That did not happen. What happened was observatories. Interesting how things begin to note. So, astronomer Kuiper and Alika Herring were the first beginning of what was to follow a series of telescopes on the mountain, which I addressed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, to unlock the mysteries of the universe. And Dr. Walt Steiger, who for many years, for 40 years, he was at UH Manoa and later at UH Hilo, working on astronomy as well. So, more recently in the paper, let's say the governor, through a press release, noted that decommissioning of a number of obsolete telescopes is a plan for UH and Mauna Kea, and I mentioned that last week before I had read his text. But basically, you take it down, and astronomers say that the establishment of TMT and the advanced technology will help others with the state of technology to move forward. In other words, there's some synergy between the TMT and the other telescopes. So, when we look at the whole sense of it, it was a theme of job creation, economic development, and of course, for science. Now, in the 1990s, the audit that came out, it's my last paragraph, on the Office of Mauna Kea Management, it was established to improve the management of the mountain, and the governor says we need to go further, but initially, it was public safety, culture and religious burial sites, the EV, environmental concerns, science initiatives, and access issues. That was their mission statement. And it's been an ongoing effort. And if you read the press release on Monday, the 25th, it brings forth yet another chapter on Mauna Kea because the governor unveils a Mauna Kea plan. And you can look at it, yesterday's paper, today's paper, which is pretty specific. So I close by saying that, you know, the theme of, hopefully it's insightful rather than insightful, the INCTEFUL. And, you know, if you look at the history of Mauna Kea, it's been a long journey. The mountain has been through a lot of changes going forward, a lot of things that came into play, which you did this, and you may need to do that to move along here. But hopefully our conversations, and over the next 4 weeks, we did one last week, we do this one, and we do 2 more. It's hoped that, you know, Mauna Kea can find the common ground for both science, culture, for everyone as such. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Gerald, for that context. I wanted to go back where I left off and introduce Peter Adler. Peter is the, I'm not sure how to introduce Peter these days. Peter is a kind of a heat-seeking missile. He ends up in all kinds of circumstances, but primarily for the purpose of trying to resolve complex issues of science and policy. And we all have our passions, and sometimes science doesn't get lost in that process, and it's one of the things that Peter has excelled in over the years and has been doing this work for 30 or 40 years. We're starting to get questions already. One of the first questions we got is, what is sacred? And so Peter's actually prepared to talk a little bit about that. Not that he's the expert in sacred, but he has some real creative ways of thinking about that, and I think that's a good way to start that conversation. Say it.
Turn your cell phones on.
Oh, yeah. Just simple meeting etiquette, if you would turn your cell phone on. They do the same. And keep our disruptions to a minimum. Thank you. Peter, please.
Thanks, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to try and speak.
Please use the microphone.
Okay, I will try.
Take that off.
I want to sit down in a couple minutes and not stand if I can, so I know that makes it hard. But first, let me just say that it's a pleasure. Thank you, Donna, and Richard, and Gerald, and others for inviting me here. I was actually a little scared to come over here because I'm at the deep end of the pool in areas where I don't swim very often in this whole business of what is sacred. But I just want to thank you for that invitation because I think this is such an important conversation. And it's a hard conversation, but it's one that we must do, and we must do it well. My own involvement in this goes back to 2007. For a number of years, I was the CEO of an organization headquartered in Colorado and Washington called the Keystone Center. I was asked to come there. I stayed there a little longer than I thought. But in the course of that, I was asked by the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, which is a major investor in the 30-meter telescope, if I would come and do an independent look at what might happen. And some of you might have seen the article in the paper the other day. That report is now public. The report belongs to the Moore Foundation. But I promised them, and I will promise you, that I will do my very best to say independent. I have no dog in this fight, except that I've been up Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa many times. And I love the mountain too. There's many people who love that mountain for many different reasons. So, but I don't come into this with a view that says it's good or bad. I'm really interested in trying to see if we can elevate our conversation. I also want to just say that I see some old friends here, some folks that I've known for many years, Tom Peake, Nelson, and Gerald, and others, and it's a pleasure to be here. And people that I interviewed, actually, when I was doing this project, and Aaron, you were one of those, and others. So thank you for the invitation, and I'm going to try to talk about a few things tonight. I'm not a particularly religious scholar or a person like that, and there are probably many other people who would be way better at doing this than me, including maybe some of the people who will talk later, or some of you. But I've been thinking really hard about this since I was asked to do this now. I stayed up kind of scratching my head at night, waking up at 3 in the morning saying, I don't know if I can speak about this because this is not something I talk about. But I'm going to try, and I spent a lot of time trying to write my thoughts, and I'm not going to read those, but I do want to track through this conversation. And what I want to do is to talk a little bit about sacred spaces and places and objects, but also I want to try to link it to the things I actually do know a little bit more about, which is how you have dialogue and discussion about difficult topics and the leadership that is needed to do that. So I think a lot of this is about leadership, and that includes the leadership that's right here in this room. So I want to start with a film clip because I love film. My motto is so little time and so many movies. So I want to show you a film clip, and Donna, you may need to help me to boot this up. I'll try. But this is a film clip from the movie Invictus. How many of you might have seen that? This is the one about Nelson Mandela and the Springs. Only 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. Oh, go to the movies, guys. You guys need to see movies. So I think movies tell a lot to us if they're good movies and they're done right. So let me set the stage for you. What we're going to see is a scene, this is a true story, in which Matt Damon plays a guy named Francois Pinard, who was a trader. He was a trader. He had a trading house with his family, but he was also a rugby player, and he commanded and captained the rugby team in South Africa. And he actually does a pretty good job of capturing some of the accent on that. And what you'll also see in there is Morgan Freeman as Nelson Mandela. And this is a meeting that actually took place. I'm sure it was amplified up a little bit for this. But the story is so important and relevant to us because Mandela was trying to build a new country. He'd come in after so much violence. He himself had been a revolutionary, a terrorist at one point. He was named a terrorist. But when he became president of South Africa, he was trying to build bridges. And he was under tremendous pressure to eradicate the name of the Springboks and get them off. It was a repulsive name to many of the black people and colored, which are Indian people, and mixed marriages. And he was under tremendous pressure. They said, get rid of those guys. We're the new regime. And therefore, they're out and we're in. And what he did was, he tried very hard not to do that because he said, we have to build some bridges. And the Springbok team, which was made up mainly of white players, there was a couple of black players in there too, he said, we need to do this. We need to do this and show that in our new country, everybody has a place. And if we take the name Springboks out, which is revered, and if we take all these players out, we will have missed an opportunity to show the world that we really don't have to kill our enemies to be able to succeed. So he fought hard to keep the name Springboks, and he also wanted his team to win. He was a very competitive guy. He wanted them to win. So the scene we're going to see is from Invictus, is a meeting between Nelson Mandela and Francois Pinard. And I'm going to show it to you because it's a great clip about leadership, and then we'll come back to it. Okay. Can you see? Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
What's he like?
I worked for the previous president. I felt my job to be invisible. This president, when he found out I'd like to eat toffee, he brought me some back from his visit to England. So no one's invisible. That's where you wait. One of his assistants will come for you, and the bathroom is over there if you need it.
Okay, thanks.
What are our chances in the World Cup? I mean, for real.
We'll do our best. That I can guarantee.
Officer the President. Flag the stage, please. Oh,
Francois, what an honor. I am so excited. Thank you for coming all this way to see me.
Yes, sir. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. President.
So, tell me, Francois, how was your ankle?
My ankle.
I was told it was hurt. Is it healed?
The truth is, sir, you never really play at 100%, no matter what.
I guess. In sports as in life.
Yes, sir.
Please, sit. Take this one. Looking into the light hurts my eyes. Mrs. Bliss, you are a shining light in my day.
yes, sir.
Mrs. Bliss, this is Francois Pinard, captain of the Springboks.
I'm McGinnis, my privilege.
Officer McGinnis. Shall I report, sir?
No, I would prefer to do it myself. Thank you very much, Mrs. Bliss. How do you like your tea, Francois?
Just milk, please.
The English have given us many things, including rugby. But afternoon tea, that is the latest. Carry on.
Thank you, sir.
You will have a very difficult job.
I do. I have a trading business.
Captain of the Springboks. A very difficult job.
Well, not compared to yours, Mr. President.
Well, no one is trying to tear my head off while I'm doing mine.
Yes, sir.
Tell me, Francois, what is your philosophy on leadership? How do you inspire your team to do their best?
By example. I've always thought to lead by example, sir.
Well, that is right. That is exactly right. But how to get them to be better than they think they can be? That is very difficult, I find. Inspiration, perhaps. How do we inspire ourselves to greatness when nothing less will do? How do we inspire everyone around us? I sometimes think it is by using the work of others. On Robben Island, when things got very bad, I found inspiration in a poem.
A poem?
A Victorian poem. Just words, but they helped me to stand when all I wanted to do was to lie down. But you didn't come all this way to hear an old man talk about things that make no sense.
No, please, Mr. President. It makes complete sense to me. On the day of a big match, say the test, in the bus on the way to the stadium, nobody talks.
Ah, yes. They're all preparing.
Right. But when I think we're ready, I have the bus driver put on a song. Something I've chosen, one we all know. And we listen to the words together. And it helps.
I remember when I was invited to the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. Everybody in the stadium greeted me with a song. At the time, the future, our future, seemed very big. But to hear that song in the voices of people from all over our planet made me proud to be South African. It inspired me to come home and do better. It allowed me to expect more of myself.
May I ask, what was the song, sir?
Well, it was in Posisikilele, Africa. A very inspiring song. We need inspiration, Francois. Because in order to build our nation, we must all exceed our own expectations.
Thanks, Don. Turn it off. So I'm going to sit here. I know you'd probably rather just watch the movie. So just so you know, the Springboks, who were very underrated, went on and won the World Cup in rugby that year. Nobody thought it was like that American Olympic team that went to Lake Placid and beat the Russians. It was so improbable, so unexpected. So I want to just start by saying that this is about leadership, this is about constructive dialogue, and I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. I don't know that David Ige is Nelson Mandela, but at least we have something on the table that we can start to argue about, but that's okay. So when I was in my 20s, I lived and worked in a little town in India for 2 years. This was a very profound time in my life personally. If you remember, well, I see a few gray hairs in here, and if you remember what life is like at 22, you are in a new place, you're in a different place. So it was profound. I learned about India, I learned about my culture, I learned about myself. Not all of it was pleasing, but in the process of doing that, I saw some really eye-popping things that I had never encountered, never ever encountered in my life. And one of those was the aftermath of some very vicious riots that went on all over India between Muslims and Hindus. And this communal rioting still happens. We're not in that place, but maybe we can derive some lessons from it. So, and this still happens. There are communal riots. I was back in India in February, and there were several riots going on in different places. And sometimes they start with a perceived insult, with a truck driver who accidentally hits a cow on the road, or it might be an insult to the imam at the local mosque. And what happens afterwards is a certain kind of dynamic in which, after that precipitating moment, there are these incitements that come from absolutists on both sides. Zealots who are Muslim and zealots that are Hindu. And they really rev things up, and there are mobs that form. Mobs form in these communal riots. And often these are made up of bored, angry, alienated younger people, younger men. It's not the old guys who go do the fighting, it's the younger ones, and it always seems to be that way. And sometimes those guys will riot. They're full of adrenaline. They'll rampage through the streets. They'll pull people from their beds. They'll hack them to death. They'll rape the women. They'll burn the stores and homes of their enemies. I mean, it's very violent. Anybody here been to India? Yeah, so you may have been there and noticed some of that stuff. Maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. It still goes on. And I saw the aftermath of some of this. And a lot of this was always about cows, about cattle, about cows. And cows, as you know, are sacred. There's even a phrase, sacred cow. We use that in English. And cows are sacred to Hindus. And there are wonderful stories about why they are what they are and why they became allies to the gods. And I thought I was getting this in my head. I thought I was starting to understand this. And then I saw something that changed the abstract understandings that I had. And it was a terrible moment. And what had happened was that a bullock cart, a two-wheel bullock cart that was being pulled by two very grand white Brahma bulls, crashed to the ground, and the axle broke. And this farmer's vegetables and oil, cans of oil and sacks of rice, sacks of fruit, it all fell on the pavement. It was about a half a mile from my house, and there was a big ruckus. A lot of people were gathering. I went there and lurked around and listened and tried to see. There was nothing I could do, but I was hungry to see this, what was going on. And one of the man's two beautiful animals had a broken leg and was bleeding. And this farmer, who was poor by any standard we have, was looking at his bull and he was crying. And he was crying, terribly crying. And the animal, I realized, was his livelihood, it was his wealth, it was a pet, it was a member of his family. These are cherished animals there. And a policeman arrived, and then someone who seemed a bit more experienced in animals. Maybe he was a veterinarian or an agricultural officer, I don't know what he was. But he came and looked at the animal, and the animal was clearly in pain, and the man shook his head and kind of pulled out his mustache and just kept shaking his head. And I know in my world, maybe in yours, that animal would have been euthanized. It was a broken leg, it was probably not going to get healed. And we would have wanted to do something to put the animal out of its misery. And I was, what happened next was that a truck came up, picked up the farmer's vegetables and rice and stuff and put it in the back of the truck. They took the broken cart and put that in the back of the truck, and the truck drove off to the village or the hamlet, and then the man walked off with his remaining animal, leaving this cow, this broken cow on the side of the road. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't stand to see this animal suffering. I can't stand it. You think about your dog or your cat or your pet or even one of your children in pain and how that would hurt us. And if it was me, if it was my cow, I would have put a bullet in it. I would have put a bullet in his brain to put this animal out of its misery. But it was different in India. It was different. And all abstractions I had about sacred cows out the window. And when I tried to understand what was going on, I couldn't quite get it. And then friends of mine told me this was all about karma. This magnificent animal may have been the reincarnation of somebody else, and that there was a suffering that needed to happen. And maybe the animal needed to suffer more before it was reborn, or maybe it was the farmer that needed to suffer, or maybe it was me, I don't know. It could have been me too. But what really started to hammer home for me in this incident, and has come home in other ways, is this whole question of worldviews, culture. We think we understand things, and then all of a sudden we realize we only understand it superficially. So today I'm thinking a lot about the contradictions. In preparation for this, I've been thinking a lot about contradictions and paradoxes of what might be sacred in my little life. And I come to you very humbly because I'm not a religious person. I have some little bit of background, but not much, to tell you the truth. And how hard it is to understand sacred objects and sacred places of other people. I can sort of begin to understand a few things about my own, but it's a challenge to understand it. And it does have to do with worldviews and with culture. And I know we're going to hear from some of our friends about Hawaiian culture. Those are mysterious terms, worldviews and culture. And we throw those terms around and we bandy them about, and very often we talk past each other. And we sometimes use those as a sword or a shield in some battle that we're engaged in. But the very best definition, and I did study this when I was in graduate school, the best definition I heard a lot of academic ones, but the best one I ever heard was, culture is the way we do things around here. Right here is how we do things. That's the best definition of culture. And it could be an organization, it could be a profession, it could be at your home, it could be in your community, it could be among Japanese. I'm married to a Japanese woman. It could be among, the university has a culture, or you have a culture here in this fine organization. It's how we do things here. That starts to tell us something. But worldviews are a little different, and I was puzzling around about this. And worldviews are literally the water we swim in. It's like that metaphor about the fish swimming in water. Does a fish even know that it's in water? Probably not until you take it out and then something's going on. Hey, something's happening. But is it aware in some part of its fishiness that there is something called water? Or is it something so obvious that the fish never thinks about it, the way we don't think about air until we can't breathe? We just assume it. We swim in our worldviews. That's the waters we swim in. And the other thing that has occurred to me is that, before I kind of talk more about sacred and what little I know about it, or think about it, is that we all have multiple cultures. There was a time maybe when we were all one, we only had one culture, but not anymore. We are many, many different things. And I'm someone with Jewish forebears, a line of people, most of whom were killed in World War II. I'm a first-generation American myself, and they were turned into kindling. Those people are gone. My ancestors are gone. That's part of my worldview. That's part of the waters I swim in, but it's not the only one. I'm also a trained social science, so I swim in those waters. And I'm a mediator and a planner, and I swim in those waters. And I'm a family person, and I live in a particular geographic community, and that is part of the waters that I swim in. So these worldviews are kind of different. I meant to say that I was also a baby boomer, so that's definitely culture. And I think partly that's what makes all this so difficult, so hard, so challenging for us to get down to and talk about. And one writer put it this way about worldviews. This writer said, worldviews shape culture. Different worldview, different culture. So we have these very specific things that we are. And it makes things challenging. It makes things hard. So the Mauna Kea discussions seem so difficult, partly because we are talking about things that are sacred, and sacred in different ways to different people at different times. And that's the piece that I've been scratching my head about and thinking about, and I claim no expertise in this. There's others in this room who would know much more than me, but I may never be invited back to Hamakua after this, so that's okay too. So, but I know this. I know that in whatever else we are in our own culture, or the cultures that we hold, and the worldviews that we hold, we are also a line of people that have come from lots of places. The Marquesas, Tahiti, China, Japan, Korea, Philippines. Now, even more recently, we have Laotians and Thais, and we have lots of cultures here. And everybody's wearing some of those pieces, and they're also maybe part of the local culture, or they're learning to be that. So we aren't one thing, we are many things. And I worry that the sacred is sort of bound up into this. We can't talk about sacred without talking about some of this stuff. And those are very, very hard conversations. And instead we wind up sometimes talking in slogans, or in headline stories of our version. The moments I really cherish are when I've had these really good conversations and I've learned the stories of other people. I've learned from them. I found out where their people came from, who were their people long ago. I love that. I like stories. Stories tell. That's why I like film clips, because film clips are stories, and they tell us things. So, as I've been thinking about this business of sacred, here's a couple examples that somehow seem relevant. And some of you may know of the Tlingit people and the Northwest tribes up and down Vancouver Island in the Northwest. And the natural world, like the world, as I understand it, of Hawaiians, is sacred. It is a living, breathing, inhaling, exhaling world. They live in this world of forests and fogs and salmon and killer whales, and they do all kinds of things, bears and all that stuff. And they hold the natural world very, very sacred. And much like we do here, many people here. And they also carve totem poles. Everybody ever seen those beautiful totem poles in the Northwest, maybe in museums? They carve those, and they revere those totem poles, but the totem poles themselves are not sacred. It's what they represent that has a sacred aspect to it. And I kind of think of them as, they're probably analogous to Aumakua in Hawaii. These are animals and clans. They're important, and they have to be protectors of those animals. And they're tied up with who they are and what their identity is. I'm not an expert on this. I defer to all of you. But for Westerners, for 100 years, those totem poles have been art. They've been decorations. They've been beautiful things, mysterious things, and many of them have been taken away from the Northwest. Nonetheless, we now know that the Tlingit people love those things, and they cherish them. And that is why, actually, the Honolulu Academy of Arts is returning one of the most important totem poles to southeastern Alaska, where it came from. And the Tlingit people will not varnish it and make it permanent. They will let it deteriorate into the mist and into the forest, because that's part of the natural world that they revere. A few other thoughts that have hit me this week. We know that some books are holy, and even though the books themselves aren't directly worshipped, they're very, very important. The Bible, the Quran, the Torah, those are important objects, and when someone burns one or denigrates it or ridicules it, it creates an offense. It creates a big offense, because those books give people guidance on what is sacred. They're not sacred in themselves. We may treat those as revered objects, but they are pointers, they're guides to what is sacred and how lives should be pursued and lived. In all places, when we gather, sometimes to commemorate bigger things like Christmas or Passover or Ramadan or Makahiki, these are special timeouts. These are times when, if people act badly at those times, it creates an insult for us. It creates insult. It could be the same behavior on the street or at the park, but at that moment, we say, no, that's not the right time. That's not the right place. And so it might be very insulting. And it's the same with gatherings of family and clan and community and nation. Some of these moments become sacred because we're taking time out from business as usual to remember people on whose shoulders we stand. And the ancestors themselves weren't sacred. I'll just tell you, in my own line, there were lots of scoundrels and rascals and self-centered idiots, and yet it's the time out to remember this. That's what becomes precious. That's what becomes sacred. So there's a moment, because we're thinking about things that are bigger than our personal selves, it's bigger than our own egos, it's bigger than the everyday business, and bad behavior at those times is rude, even though I know some of my ancestors would have been the first to be rude. But at that moment, that's not what we're talking about. It's about me connecting with something bigger. And today we're thinking about Mauna Kea, which is old and iconic and so important to so many different people. And there are lots of mountains, big mountains all over the world that are like that. Mount Rainier in Washington, Mount Shasta in California, Mount Everest in Nepal, Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, Mount Olympus in Greece. There are these big, old, sacred mountains that are all over the place. And I've been asking myself, well, what is it that makes those places sacred? What is it that makes Everest sacred to so many Nepalis? Or what is it that makes Mount Rainier or Shasta sacred to those folks? And what I learned in this last week is that there's an explanation, and it's called Mundi Axis. I didn't know this word. I didn't know this word until this week, until I was trying to get my head screwed on straight for tonight. And this Mundi Axis, it literally means a vertical connection to the world. It's the connection between ground and sky, and certain mountains are ladders up from the earth to the heavens, and they're a linkage point from our everyday grungy, grubby, ongoing things that we do into a different space. And they take us there, they remind us of that. So, and there's a connection, they connect the secular things that are going on in our lives with the sacred things that, and both of those, we carry all of those in ourselves. We all have the sacred and we all have the secular. And sometimes we have the profane. We have all of those things. We're humans, we're people. And we try our best to do things as we get older. I know I try better. So I have two-year-old grandsons, little boys, little blonde-haired boys. I don't know where the blonde came from exactly. But they're like little barbarians. They don't know anything. And we're teaching them. My wife is very stern and tough, much tougher than me. And so we're training them not to be rude, not to be insulting. And these little boys are doing all the things that little boys do. They smack each other around, and they laugh, and they hold hands, and they eat together, and they smack each other again. So I'm watching this, and I'm going, that was me. That's me. That's you. That's all of us. We come from that state. And this Mundi Axis is a connection that they will learn. They don't know this, or maybe they feel it in some part, in some way that I can't understand. But I know that worldview will come to them eventually. So, a few more ideas. Just in my opinion, this sacred, and this is just me, and I mean no offense to anybody else, but the sacred doesn't lie in things. It's not in the totem pole. It's not in that object. It's not in the book itself. It comes to protocol, ceremony, ritual, conduct, to doing things in the right way. Pono way, if you want to use that word, and it's a better word. I heard a Hawaiian man once tell me about kina ole, the notion of flawlessness, which somehow seems a part of this. And he said, kina ole is about doing the right thing in the right way at the right time for the right reason and getting it right the first time. I thought that's really such an interesting notion for me. It's like eye-opening. So for me, it doesn't have to be that way for you, but for me, the sacred is always about behavior. However puzzling and contradictory that might be, it's that cow that I didn't understand what was going on in it. I didn't understand what this pained animal was going through and why somebody there wouldn't put this animal out of its misery, because that's what would happen in my world. It's not their world. It's different. And those animals are sacred objects, but it's more what they do with the animals that is so sacred to them. And there are contradictions and paradoxes, and it's not always pretty. So, just to put a point on this, I really believe that in life, we are what we do. We're not what we think, we're not what we write, we're not what we profess, we're not our sound bites, we're not our slogans, we are what we do. And hopefully we learn to do it right. But I know that I don't always do it right when I'm confronting somebody else's worldview. And I know this Mauna Kea issue is so complicated, and I want to do it right. I want to be right. Now, I don't know what that means yet, but hopefully by the end of this Odyssey, tonight and beyond, that I will. So, a few more thoughts, and then I'll bring this to a close. Sorry?
You're going long.
Okay, sorry. So, I'll just say a couple things. So, in Hawaii, I've been struck how we've become so accustomed to dealing with difficult subjects through nasty blogs and argumentative press releases and bad-tempered public meetings and through 3-minute positions and statements at legislative hearings and endless litigation. And litigation may actually be the most eternal thing of life that we have on earth. But don't misunderstand me. I believe we need brave people who have raised tough issues, and we have some of those in this room, who raise the issues and will force us to confront things that we need to look at. They will call out perceived injustices and discriminations, but I also know at the right time and in the right way, and in the right spirit, we have to have solution seekers and people who will find answers for us, because we can't live in a constant state of agitation. Some may want that, But that's not the kind of leadership that I want. I get fatigued by it, and I make a living. I work in this world of this stuff. So I'll just finish by saying, when I was a kid, I had a partially formed brain. I really believed passionately in sports and rock and roll and fast cars and girlfriends and a few buddies and getting away into the wilderness to drink beer and smoke cigarettes and that kind of stuff. And I still would kind of like some of that stuff. But I really also believe we are so challenged locally and nationally and internationally with very tough problems that it's only going to be through a group of people who can come together with reasonable intelligence and reasonable civility and reasonable goodwill, who will help us find the right pathway, who will help us find that. And that's where we need this new kinds of conversations on this very, very hard issue, which invokes many other things. So we need leaders to discuss these promises that have been made in the past and are unfulfilled. We need discussions on what happens on the mountain when Mauna Kea leases are up. We need discussions on ceded lands. We need guidance from Native Hawaiians. There are a lot of different voices, and people like me need some kind of credible guidance on protocol. How do I do this? How do I behave properly? Because I don't want to insult and I don't want to inflict any disrespect. In fact, quite the opposite. I want to honor that history. It's a mountain that I love. I'm going to end with a little poem from a colleague of mine who works in the same world I do. He does a lot of this, but he works in heavy-duty conflict zones, in those communal riots, in places where if they don't get it right, people die. And he's a person who's building these little suspension bridges across the chasms. And here's what he said, and I love it. He says, I dream the day when by the coal fire, your great-grandchildren climb on the laps of your children and beg not to be put off to bed. Grandma, Grandpa, tell us again, how did the troubles end? Thank you.
I have a couple of questions that were aimed at Peter, and I'm going to just give a couple of them. They're not, look like they maybe were written before your talk, so they're not on what you just said.
So you can answer them.
Yeah, in doing your research for Keystone Center, did you come across the Treaty of Annexation for Hawaii? Because we have been looking for it for a while.
No. I'm sure it's there. No.
It wasn't part of your
No, it was
task.
not.
Okay. How much did you make from the TMT for your report?
It wasn't from the TMT, it was the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. So I wasn't paid by the 30-meter telescope corporation.
But they are a part of it, though.
They're, sorry?
They are a part of it, that foundation.
They were an investor, and they were saying, Keystone, can we do this? Can we get this? What are the risks we run? That was my task. That was my mission.
So they invest in the TMT?
That's right, they're investing.
Yeah, they're an investor in it. They're not the TMT.
Okay.
So my job was to do a little diligence on, here's the tripwires that you're going to run, here's the gauntlet you have to run. And I don't remember how much we were paid, but however much it wasn't enough. I can find out.
So, thank you, Peter. Thoughtful, creative conversation, and we'll figure out how that fits in a while. Thank you for that. So, our next speaker is Mike Bolte. Mike is actually a senior player in the 30-meter telescope, has been involved in this process from the beginning, and here to share a little bit of their side of that picture. So, Michael, I'm not sure exactly what your title is, so why don't you start there and give us the background on that. What do you do? Thank you.
Mahalo to the people who put this thing together, and even more to everybody who's here. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the project and how we got to where we are. So, my name is Mike Bolte. I actually don't work for the 30-meter telescope project. I'm a professor at the University of California at Santa Cruz. I teach astronomy, I do research there. But I have been involved in the TMT from the very beginning. So I'm not going to talk as long as Peter. I'm sorry. I enjoyed that very much, Peter. But I have not as many remarks to make. I was going to talk about two things, in fact. The first is just a little bit about telescopes, which perhaps we don't want to lose. So from whenever men and women were first on Earth until 400 years ago, until 1609, the way that we observed the heavens was with our unaided eye. We looked up at the sky, and if you go outside and there aren't too many city lights, you can see about 2,000 stars with your naked eye, with your unaided eye. And, people did amazing things observing the heavens with their eyes. The incredible navigation feats that many people in this room know much more about than I do. Developing calendars, clocks, knowing when to plant crops, knowing when they're doing. That was all done by looking at the sky. And that's what we knew for probably hundreds of thousands of years. So what happened in 1609 was Galileo made the first little telescope, and it really was a little telescope. It had a lens at the front that was 3 inches in diameter, and the whole thing was maybe that big. So what did he do? Galileo looked at many things, but he started with the planet Jupiter, and he saw that there were moons that were orbiting the planet Jupiter. Those had never been seen before. He looked at the planet Venus, which is the morning and the evening star, the very bright thing that follows close to the sun. And he realized it went through phases, just like our moon does. And those two things, the moons going around Jupiter and the phases of Venus, were the scientific proof that, in fact, the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, which everybody had assumed till then. They assumed that the stars and the sun and everything went around the Earth, because we don't feel like we're zooming around through space, right? We're all sitting here. And that model of the universe that pretty much all peoples, independent of culture, so folks all over the world developed their models for how the universe came to be and what the universe is like. And pretty much everybody assumed the Earth was at the center. So Galileo, with this tiny little telescope, all of a sudden changed humankind's view of their place and what the universe was like. All of a sudden, the Earth wasn't at the center anymore, but the sun was. So that was the start. The next thing Galileo did isn't as well known, and that is he looked at the Milky Way. I don't actually quite know where we are. The Milky Way is this beautiful milky stream on the sky that you can see from any dark side. People didn't have any idea what that was. Galileo, with his little telescope, looked at that and realized that the Milky Way was composed of thousands and thousands of stars. And so all of a sudden, it wasn't just those stars we could see with our unaided eye. Our universe went from a few thousand stars to hundreds of thousands of stars. And that's pretty much how it's been going. So that little telescope was tiny. People have built larger and larger telescopes. With those, you get a better and better view of the universe. You can see fainter things. You can use magnification to see things better. And, since Galileo, since 1609, we've learned a whole bunch of stuff about the universe. 100 years ago, as telescopes got powerful enough, we, for the first time, realized that this galaxy that we live in, this galaxy of stars that the sun and the Earth is a part of, was just one of billions of galaxies out there. And not only was the Earth not the center of the universe, the sun wasn't the center of the universe, not even our galaxy was the center of the universe. But we live in this unimaginably vast space. So, this is what telescopes have been doing. And the 30-meter telescope is sort of the next in this long line that goes all the way back to Galileo of building instruments and telescopes that allow us to look further and further into space and therefore time, and to see things much more clearly in our own solar system, in the local universe. So the reason astronomers are excited about the 30-meter telescope is we think this is the first time we'll have a facility powerful enough to actually look, and this sounds crazy, to look all the way back through space and time to the very first stars and galaxies that form the universe. Okay, so that's why we build these things. Gerald said I should remember to make a point. And that is, some people say, well, that's all fine, to try to develop physical models for the universe. But what else has astronomy done for me lately? And it turns out there are lots of side benefits from astronomy that I typically don't talk about much. The real reason that humans undertake this study of astronomy is really to explore the universe, try to figure out how it works. But there are many things that happen. As we've developed adaptive optics to make clearer vision to the stars with telescopes, you can apply the same thing to looking at people's eyes, and this has become actually quite a big thing. So understanding degenerate eye diseases has become much, much better with those same adaptive optic systems that we use at telescopes, looking in people's eyes. You can do both the medicine better, you can do research better. We developed computer programs, algorithms, to look for structure in the galaxies in the sky. Try to figure out how clumpy it is, how to quantitatively define the universe. And it turns out those same algorithms have now been put to use. People looking for very early signs of breast cancer. So if you get a mammogram, they look at the distribution of unusual cells, and much, much earlier now you can detect precancerous activity using these algorithms from astronomy. In the end, atomic physics, quantum mechanics, understanding how atoms work, the microscopic world, that was all originated 100 years ago now by studies of the sun. Astronomers said, boy, there are a bunch of funny things we see in the spectrum of the sun, which led to quantum mechanics, which is the reason we have computers and digital projectors and phones and all this stuff. So astronomy is actually at the basis of many practical things that we all use every day in life. Okay, that was the first thing, telescopes. The second thing I wanted to talk about, and this is actually what I'm happy to talk about with the folks in this room in particular, and that is the TMT process. And what was in my mind, and most of people's mind who were leaders in the project as we went along. We first started to consider Mauna Kea close to a decade ago. I think this project started in about 2004. And we already knew that the world here in Hawaii was different than it had been when the telescopes first started to be developed back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. So we knew somehow things had to be different for the TMT to successfully get a permit to build at Mauna Kea and to be accepted as a positive thing in this community here on the Big Island. So we came over and we talked to people. We talked to people in the agencies in Honolulu. We talked to people at the Office of Mauna Kea Management. We talked to many people on the ground here in the community, both supporters and opponents. And to be honest, there weren't that many supporters. There were plenty of people who didn't quite know, but they had a vaguely negative sense about astronomy because that's what had been building in the community, in my opinion. So the first thing I want to say to everybody in this room, and I say it to anybody who I get the chance to, is every single person who I interacted with in those early days and ever since, their guiding principle, for sure, was doing right by Mauna Kea. Not everybody had the same vision for what that meant, but I never ran into anybody who suggested that we take any shortcuts in the permitting process. We certainly got no free passes whatsoever. Everybody was doing their job. They were interested in the mountain and interested in doing right by the mountain, doing things properly. Again, there's not a single exception in all the people who I interacted with all those years. So, we said, what do we need to do? We realized that not everybody is happy. In fact, most people are not happy with, I don't want to say that. We realized there were ways the mountain could be managed better. And we wanted our project to be one that recognized all those things, that understood more what it meant to do things in a Pono way. And we wanted to be the leaders in sort of setting a new standard for how things were done at Mauna Kea, and even broader within the state of Hawaii. So let me see. I only wrote things down so I don't forget anything important. So we heard a zillion things. The first thing we learned, I think, was that nobody trusted us. Most people viewed us with suspicion when we showed up. Office of Mauna Kea Management, many of the people in the community. So we had to demonstrate that we were really interested in doing things differently. that we were able to listen. It's not so easy to listen as many people realize. So we were going to listen, and we were able to listen. We were going to do things differently, and we had to sort of prove ourselves to be trustworthy before anybody would trust us. So that's what we worked on in those early years with lots of folks. So we heard of many things. I'm going to tell you the three main things that we heard and what we did about it. The first was the site. The specific site at the mountain is very important. There are places that are highly sensitive, and there are places that are not as highly sensitive. Every place up there is sensitive, right? But some places are less sensitive than others. And we weren't the first ones to think about this or realize this. Going back more than a decade now, people had identified the areas up there in the summit area, of course the summit has never been built upon, that were less sensitive for cultural reasons, that has to do with view planes, for cultural reasons related to the archaeology of the site, right? For environmental reasons, so it's a very fragile environment. There are ferns, there are lichens that aren't found anyplace else. Just because of the way the climate is up there, it's a very difficult place for anything to live. So you got to be careful with all that stuff, the insects. So started in 2000, even before that, this place called the Northern Plateau had been identified as one of the least sensitive areas up there, certainly less sensitive than the summit ridges where the telescopes currently are. It's about 700 feet from the summit down there on the north side. It's a hard lava plain. There's no puddles down there. And from this side of the mountain, from the Hilo side, you can't even see you wouldn't be able to see the 30-meter telescope sighted there. And because it is down so far from the summit, from many of the view planes along the coast on the Kona side, it's also hard to see it there. It's less obvious than the other telescopes on the summit. So, we learned that we should go someplace that was less sensitive. One had already been identified. The TMT didn't make this decision. Many people had been consulted about sensitivities up there. It was reaffirmed that this was the least sensitive place amongst those areas up there by the Kahuku Mauna. We had long discussions with them. And in the EIS, that was part of the EIS, was evaluating the impacts on both environment and culture. Okay, next thing we heard was that there are many people in the community here who were fine with the concept of astronomy as a sort of a good industry for this island, right? You have a unique resource up there. The skies above Mauna Kea are the best window to the universe any place on Earth. Okay? It's a clean industry. The people who work at observatories aren't astronomers. I should just be clear about that. 30-meter telescope, our operations plan, we have 140 employees, and maybe there'll be 6 astronomers. The rest are all people who do engineering, various technical things up there. Computer science, you need financial people to do the books. So these are considered good jobs. And many people in the community here said, yes, those are the kind of jobs we'd love to have, so when our kids go off and get their college degree, they have a good livelihood here back home. And they don't have to stay in the mainland or wherever they end up. They can come home and have good jobs. The problem that we heard was it was hard. That promise had never been quite realized. And in fact, the path from today to good jobs in the astronomy industry, I don't really like that word, but it is, it wasn't there. So we said, what can we do to help? And we heard a couple things. We heard STEM education was important. And you got to start with the kids, K, all the way up through 12, making sure you're engaging kids in the so-called STEM sciences. Engineering, technology, science. So this is the origin of the Think Fund, the $1 million a year that goes for STEM studies. We also heard that the TMT shouldn't be distributing that. We should put that in local hands, so we've done that. So K through 12, get the kids interested in science and in education, make school fun. Second aspect of that is what we call our workforce pipeline development, which is the same thing, just higher up. So now you're a kid in the community college or at UH Hilo, or someplace else. It doesn't have to be somebody from the island, but we're targeting these for people in the island. And you have the opportunity to do internships at the observatories or some of the related high-tech businesses around here. So you really get a skill set that guarantees that you'll have employment by the time these things roll around. So that was what we heard. We heard we got to have programs in place, and it would be helpful if the TMT could fund these, basically be engaged in the community. So we did that. The last, well, not the last thing, but the last thing that we're going to talk about here is the other thing we heard is actually a common problem for states every place. States, have all these public lands. It's up to them to take care of them, right? To monitor things, to make sure the environment is well taken care of, and you have all the safeguards in place that things don't go off the rails all the time. And that takes resources. So the other thing we heard was the Office of Mauna Kea Management needs resources to properly manage the mountain, to hire the rangers up there, to have guides, to do monitoring, to sort of keep the observatory's feet to the fire in that case, but there are other activities up there too. All that takes resources. So instead of the $1 a year rent, which is just a nominal number that the other observatories pay, we agreed to $1 million a year, 80% which goes to manage the mountain, stewardship of Mauna Kea, 20% goes to OHA. So that's what we think of is we said, okay, let's hear what people's issues are, and let's address them. And let's address them in a serious way. And so that's how we developed these programs. We always did it in consultation with people here, because one thing Peter said is absolutely true, and I've learned it multiple times now, and that is, it's really hard to understand somebody else's culture. And you can spend as many years as you want. I've spent many years in the law. Right? And there are a whole bunch of things I just don't get. And I've learned, whatever my view is, if Richard Haw says, no, Mike, that's the wrong way to think about it, he's right. And I'm wrong. So anyway, thanks for listening to that. That's what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to not just be a continuation of some bad way of doing business. We've tried to define a new way to do business up there, that the community benefits better, the mountain is better taken care of, yet we still access this fantastic view of the universe and continue this exploration of the universe. Okay, I have two little stories to finish up here. And these two stories are related to why I still am part of this project, to tell you the truth. If I thought everybody was against it, I'd say, well, this is the wrong thing to do. So one of the stories was during this contested case hearing. It was the fall of 2012, I think. So there were many people in the room here who were there. I was there for all 7 days. It was hot. The room was crowded. Everything was emotionally charged, right? These are deeply held issues that people are in there to express their views on. So, there was lots of muttering during most of the time. And, you could just kind of hear this rumble of discontent going on. So I was called to give testimony about the scientific promise of the observatory. So I had my prepared remarks. I went through them. And then I was cross-examined by, I was hoping that he would be here tonight, by Uncle Koo. Right? So he sat down. I wasn't actually sure what a cross-examination of the science was going to be. And he just immediately launched into asking me questions about astronomy. He started with string theory. He went to how galaxies form. And this room, which, just had an atmosphere of high tension, all of a sudden he would ask me a question. And there wasn't a lot of muttering. There weren't people, shoving. Everybody was silent, and they were listening. And we had this wonderful conversation for about 20 minutes about astronomy before the hearing officer finally said, well, this is all great, but we have to get on with this thing. And when I sat down, I thought, this just reaffirms to me that across cultures, across everything, everybody loves exploring the universe and learning about what we do. A second story is quicker. At another one of these public meetings, I've been to many, This is one of the scoping meetings for the EIS, I think. Everybody signs up, and at the end of the meeting, you have the microphone for 3 minutes, and you say your words. So one of the ones we had over on the other side of the aisle, guy had signed up, an elderly man, I don't know who he was, I still don't know who he is. He walked up to the microphone, he gave his family and his place history, which is often how that starts, I love to hear that. And then he said that his grandfather had been a kupuna. I don't know if Mauna Kea was actually his kuleana or not, I can't remember. But anyway, said he was a kupuna, and he thought, this old fellow, that if his grandfather was still alive today and he did this, he said he'd want to be one of the first ones to look through your telescope. That's all I had to say. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you being here.
Don't go anywhere. You got some questions here. Several people asked questions about what science can be done by TMT on Mauna Kea and not in Chile, and what can be done in Chile but not in Mauna Kea.
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. So we considered Chile as one of the sites. Mauna Kea turns out to be a little bit better than any other site we've ever tested for doing astronomy. But a little bit better is a little bit better. Thank you very much, Judy. But as actually may or may not be obvious to everybody, if you go out from Mauna Kea, we're at a declination on the Earth of +19, you can see a certain chunk of the sky. And in fact, you can see things that are north of about 40 degrees latitude that people in Chile will never see. So, astronomy, I just told you there are billions and billions of galaxies, right? So you can say, well, how come those 2 billion over there aren't just as good as the 2 billion in the south? And for certain kinds of science, you're absolutely right. There are some key objects that you can only see from one hemisphere or the other that have played pretty key roles. In the southern hemisphere, it's mostly something called the Large and Small Magellanic Cloud, these very close dwarf galaxy companions. In the northern hemisphere, it's this beautiful galaxy, one of the only ones you can see with your naked eye, called Andromeda, which looks a lot like the Milky Way, which is kind of our test bed for many, many theories about how galaxies like our own are put together. It's hard to study ours because we're in the middle of it. Andromeda is this beautiful example of a big spiral galaxy there. But basically, the big telescopes in the south and the 30-meter telescope at Mauna Kea are beautifully complementary in that you can cover the entire sky.
It's a question that goes back a ways. Perhaps the writer already knows the answer, but what year was it that you and Henry Yang sat in Rose Sang's office and first heard the Hawaiian concerns about TMT? And do you remember what they told you?
Okay. I don't know. So I started working on this big telescope project in the year 2000. Okay, we first started visiting people like Rose Sang, who was the chancellor at UHU. I don't know, Richard, do you remember? Because we engaged you pretty early too. It must have been 2003, 2004.
Meeting with Dr. Shimon, Dr. Yang, Inoue's aide with the promises was in the hallway. You remember the meeting?
Were you there, DeMello?
Shota, Paul Neves, Felico Canahele, and several other people. Remember that? I think that's the one Nelson's asking me about.
Okay. Why are you asking Nelson? I don't want to be evasive.
It was quite a few years ago, probably 2007 or 2006.
Okay, as late as that.
And I think the same tripwires that Peter told the Gordon Moore Foundation was told to you by the Hawaiians back
then.
Okay, that's correct.
9 to 10 years.
That's absolutely
What did you learn about it?
Oh, the answer just meant Peter's report, which has recently been in the news again, The Keystone Report is what that was called. You pretty much learned everything that we had been learning in all our conversations over here. There were a whole bunch of issues with the management of Mauna Kea, basically. There were a whole bunch of issues with astronomy not engaging the community here. The benefits went to University of Hawaii astronomers, a fraction of the telescope time. And people said, no, the benefits need to come back to this community where this mountain is housed. And so we heard those things for a long time, Nelson. And that's exactly what I was hoping. I was explaining that we tried to address those very tripwires because we knew they were there.
Thank you, Mike. So the follow-up is, did you get the desired result from doing what you did since you heard the concern?
Well, so that's a great question. So here we are today. Did we anticipate that there would be a new, and I would say even stronger resistance? You know, I guess we didn't very well. Our goal had always been to talk to people until we found some common ground and we had a real kernel of support that was spreading here. We obviously didn't talk to enough people.
Well,
There were still some issues.
Okay, Nelson, Nelson, this isn't a back and forth. I appreciate you, I gave you your question, so thank you. Here's a question. Why is TMT going forward, though the lease will expire relatively soon after TMT is built?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not going to hide it here. We have been hoping, we've been, of course, no guarantees are ever put out there, but we've been assuming that when we have a new, absolutely cutting-edge facility up there, that when we went forward to try to get extensions to the lease, that it would happen. There's no guarantees of that whatsoever.
I have a kind of an academic question, but it has to do with the concept of decolonial science. Are you familiar with that term as a teaching term, and decolonizing or decolonializing science? What would that look like? I'm not sure where the term, that's not a term I'm familiar with, but colonization of science?
Yeah, it's a term we should all become familiar with.
Okay.
It has to do with positions of privilege and these long histories of how things develop. And you want to always be mindful of groups that you're excluding, right, from your activities just because they haven't traditionally been a part of it. And you have to be even more mindful that things don't get put in place, institutionalized things, that really make it difficult to break out of those molds. This is a pretty interesting and hot topic right now on how to be more inclusive across the board in basically all activities that we do. But in particular, science is one that's kind of been the domain of white males, people who look like me.
Science is God.
There's no reason for that.
No, science is not.
Okay, let me find, there's another good question I wanted to ask about Kalakaua. You guys have been filling with great questions. Okay, it said, quoting King Kalakaua has been a source of controversy. Were you aware that many would take it as a personal insult that your company has it on the first thing you see on the TMT website?
So again, Peter's point. Again, no, I wouldn't. So that's my ignorance.
Can you understand where that might be a case, or is it just a...
Yeah, so I have grown, I'm very careful not to try to tell anybody what's good for them. I would never presume to speak for Hawaii and what's good for Hawaiians. And in the sense that that's sort of leading up to that would probably be where the sensitive thing is. I'd rather just lay things out and let people make their own decisions.
Okay, here's one that has to do with the construction and how do you know it's safe, and that the holes you need to drill, how do you know that this process is going to be absolutely safe on the mountain?
the development of the mountain, the technical side of that safety fund?
We're talking about personal, human safety?
Yes, I believe that's true, but I would also expand that to a sense of safety on the mountain, or the mountain not having some kind of a reaction to that action. Geologically. What have you done geologically to predict and anticipate the implications of your construction action?
Okay, so this very quickly gets way out of my area of expertise. I mean, civil engineers, right, have done analysis of the soil, the structure down below where the telescope would be, and that then feeds back into the plans for how you put the structures in there. So that's about all I know. Only because it's not quite what I do.
Okay, here's just a fresh question. You said that UH will get a fraction of the time of use on the telescope. What purposes are the telescopes being used for a majority of the time, and who's doing the work a majority of the time?
The telescopes, 100% of the time, do astronomy research. That's all they do. And the fraction of time just depends on how much each of the partners puts in to the construction and the operations cost. UH gets some fraction through the sublease. They get some access.
And who gets the majority?
Yeah, how do you give us a little bit more understanding about that body of users? Who kind of makes use of that?
I think that the hasn't completely settled yet, but I think the Japanese will end up being the largest single partner in the project at about 20%.
And what purposes? Astronomy, military?
Oh, I see. That's what the question is.
Yeah.
You know, so that's...
And how much military?
How much?
Yeah, okay. So you can choose to believe me or not, but 100% of what we do at all those observatories on Mauna Kea is astronomy research.
Along with the military, there's a lot of military work that's going on.
We don't do
there,
any military.
even though it's not admitted.
Absolutely not.
Japanese.
Missile guidance system. Infrared is a missile guidance system. Es may Tayuyula, a red dot, es may tutu.
Okay, let's let me see if I can get another question. How about Native Hawaiian employment on the mountain, and how do you know anything about current Native Hawaiian employment on the mountain, or what you think TMT might do to encourage them?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I had on my list to actually find out what the numbers are. So I don't know. I know it's been getting steadily better for the last 10 years because everybody's been making an attempt to hire, I'm going to say locally, which is a little different than Native Hawaiian, up there. And as I spoke to say, what we would like to do for the 30-meter telescope is by the time the telescope is up, and we need engineers and computer scientists and people that will have, in fact, helped put the stuff in place. Many other people in universities, the workforce pipeline development, obviously, we're just a piece of that. You know, our goal is to have grown a local workforce with a 30-meter telescope.
Let's just got a couple more here, and then we'll move on. Were you involved specifically in the permitting process of the mountain and the cultural impact and the EIS studies and the like? You have a personal experience in
I
that?
kind of tracked everything that was going on, so I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to figure out what your basis was. There's a question about the original cultural impact assessment recommendations for no further development on Mauna Kea. That comes out of the draft EIS. But it didn't appear in the final EIS. The cultural impact assessment did not appear in the final impact assessment used in public hearings in 2009.
Okay.
Could they actually have gotten an EIS approved without a cultural impact assessment?
It sure doesn't feel like it to me.
I don't know that. I mean, I'd be interested to know what the source of that was, but in fact, it's not complete without a cultural impact assessment, so it wouldn't have been deemed complete by that time.
Clarification from the person that asked the question.
Yeah. Comment.
Oh, what?
Oh, I was just asking asking you what the clarification. I asked him from it, and he had a little source of the data for that this was not
I took a
included.
picture of the DEIS, Appendix D, the page that the recommendation was put in. And then I also looked at the FEIS that was provided by the TMT website, where cultural impact assessment was not present. And it also had been shared with me that it wasn't present in the, I wasn't old enough to be, or here at the 2009 meeting, but in the 2009 meeting, said cultural impact assessment with the recommendation for no further development on Mauna Kea was omitted. Wasn't brought to public hearing, wasn't ever talked about in the public hearing.
Was that Pua Kanahele's report?
Yes.
Yes, I'd heard that as well.
So
She wrote this report, and you either didn't use it or distorted it.
Okay, well, let's get to that's a good question. Do you have any additional insight to add to that tonight?
Only that they tracked quite carefully the changes from the draft to the final. So when you look at that thing we posted, you can see everything that got changed, scratched, or altered in any way.
Or ignored.
Okay, well, maybe we can get some more insight on that and address it at an upcoming meeting. That's a good suggestion.
That's a good idea.
This is, when will construction resume?
I don't know when construction will resume. The governor made his announcement, of course, and that doesn't mean the discussions end by any means. So we have no date for when we're going to do that. Like I said, clearly there's more discussion and conversations that have to happen.
I'm not quite sure if you have the expertise for this question, but is Christianity a culture or a religion? And if Christianity is a religion, why is Hawaiian faith a culture?
Since Peter is now the expert in all this. I'm not an expert in that.
Me neither.
That's one of those profound questions, and I appreciate you asking it. I think it is a profound question, and we use these terms kind of interchangeably in a variety of ways, and each of them has their own power. And
Sign in is culture. Sign in is culture.
oh, sign in is culture.
Okay, so what we do every day is culture.
I see.
Then there's religion or faith. And you make that distinction in your own life of Christianity versus sign in. But you don't make that distinction when you're talking about Hawaiian spirituality. You call it culture.
Yeah, I think it's a fair comment.
In our homeland.
Good. Okay. Well, for the purpose of, some of these are will come up in future conversations. This next group. Some of these questions are really aimed at the next group, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask those again. So, thank you. We do have one question that I want the Hilo Hamakua Community Development Corp to address themselves. So, Judy, do you want to just do that yourself?
Aloha. So the question was, mahalo to Hilo Hamakua Community Development Corporation that have hosted the 4 meetings, one of which has already been held and the second one today. How have the speakers been asked to speak? And there seems to be lack of balance in the last session. I don't know if that's this session or the first one that we had. But I'd like to give you just a little bit of the genesis of how we got to this room today. I live in Mapuhoihoi, and the director of the school, Alapaki Naleha, and I work on a lot of projects in Mapuhoihoi. And I think we're also friends on Facebook. And people have been posting a lot of stuff about 30-meter telescope on Facebook. And I'm a scientist. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm not an astronomer or an astrophysicist. But just so you know what my bias and personal orientation is, I'm a scientist by training. And so Pocky sent me a message and he said, could we talk about 30-meter telescope? I love you. I respect you. But we have different views on things. And he also sent a message to Richard Hahn. And I said to myself, well, if Pocky and I, who work together quite often, need to have this conversation, maybe our whole community needs to have this conversation. So I sent an email to our board, and I said, hey, could we maybe create an opportunity for people to discuss 30-meter telescope on Mauna Kea and this Hilo Hamakua Community Development Corporation. And everybody responded, wow, great. Well, then we had a meeting about it. And we were all over the table. How are we going to do this? Well, do we have to have one person on this side and one person on that side? And what we decided was, what really mattered was people are concerned about culture. People are concerned about the science. People are concerned about the economy and the jobs and the impact on the island. People are concerned about education. So we started out, I think there were 5 topics, and we were going to do 3 nights, and we were going to do culture on one night, science on another night, and then economy and development on the 3rd night. And then it became clear kind of quickly that that was never going to bring people together if we did it that way. And so we kept our topics, the concepts that we wanted to all walk away with, but we decided to do it on different nights. We decided to have enough nights that people would come back and we would start recognizing each other and maybe say hello to each other when we see each other at KTA or, wherever we run into each other, and start relating to each other in a different way. So I asked a friend of mine who I knew was opposed to the 30-meter telescope. I asked her to connect me with some people who might come and speak on give their cultural perspective. And then that made us realize, well, we needed to have each of these perspectives each night. So the idea was we would have culture, we would have science, and then we would have those other kind of topics. So economy, the process, so we had Office of Mauna Kea Management, we had 30-meter telescope tonight. And so I don't see it so much as an imbalance. I mean, you have to be on a side for there to be an imbalance, right? And I was kind of hoping that we would all just come together and people would express their concerns and people would learn from each other. And I think that's what our board decided was the way we would go. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, board, for going through the work and the process of coming up with a way to deal with this. As we said at the beginning of the meeting, the scheduled speaker was Paul Nevis. And Paul made a decision not to, for reasons related to his legal action before the courts that's still pending, and he felt that would potentially compromise him. So I respect that call, and I have a lot of aloha for Paul. The good news is we're not dark in this world, and I have a lot of aloha for the next 2 ladies, Avani Rios and Ruth Maloa. Both of them active in this conversation. One from Avani's from Waimea, from the Case family, who's been involved in this issue. You've gotten it from the time you were a young child, I'm sure. And Ruth is from Kona. And I appreciate your willingness, without a lot of preparation, to stand up and speak your heart and your mind. And thank you very much for doing that. You make the evening. Appreciate it.
Projector's on, but the computer's off.
Beautiful to share time and space with all of you. O wau no o Havani Rios, o mauna awa kea ku mauna, o ko hako hau ku ka Hawaii, o pu kapu ai mea no ho i ku ai. My name is Havane. Mauna Kea is my mountain. Ko hako hau is my water, and pu kapu is the land that raised me. This chant that I just did, O Hano Kamauna Kea, speaks of our genealogy. O Wakea Kekane, O Papabalinu Ukawahine. Wakea, the infinite energy of the star realm, of the sky realm, is the father. Papabalinu, of the depths of the earth, is the mother. Born is Mauna a Wakea. Wakea, Pahanaumoku, Papahanaumoku, the mother of his lands, give birth to Ho'ohoku Kalani, of the star realm. Born of Wakea, her father, Ho'ohoku Kalani, the daughter. Born comes Haloa. Haloa, the food of Hawaii. Haloa, the first Kanaka, the first person. So you see here that in our genealogy is the mountain. We are born of this mountain. The people of this land, the people that have the koko running through their veins, our veins. We are born with this responsibility. It is our birthright to protect our ancestors, those who came before, and those who will come after. this sharing is from my bowl. I was raised to know that we all have a bowl in us of wisdom and light and knowledge and water. So from my bowl to your bowl, Kia aloha nui. From my heart to your heart, Kia aloha nui. From my water to your water, Kia aloha nui. I would like to take a moment, if everyone could just shut your eyes. Just shut your eyes and take a breath and breathe into this moment and be here with all of this energy in this room. Come and be here. And think of the place, picture the place, and become the place that raised you. What is the name of the wind that raised you? What is the name of the waters that raised you? What is the name of your mountain? What is the name of your land that raised you? Lift up those names, because those names are sacred. And just take a moment to breathe in that place. Do you have a place? Do you have a wind? Do you have water? Do you know your source of water? Do you know the mountain where your water comes from? The spring where your water comes from? Do you know that place? Where is that place for your ancestors? Where is that place for your parents? Think of those places, bring them up and give them power and give them acknowledgement. Become that place and bring that energy into this room. And if you don't know that place, if you cannot find that place, may you find it. May you find your water. May you find your mountain. May you find a place to help raise you. Pa'ikalima. Please clap 3 times. Pa'ikalima. Pa'ikalima. I was raised to know that a place or a person or something, an object, is sacred because it gives life. A place, a thing, a person is sacred because it gives life. Mauna awa kea is essential to our very being, our very existence. Mauna kea holds an essential form of existence. Mauna kea is the keeper of water. And so water is sacred because it gives life. The mountain is sacred because it gives life. That is what I was raised to know, and that is what I will teach my children. The sacred things, earth, air, water, and fire, are sacred because they give life. Without them, we do not exist. Without them, who are we? What are we? They give us life. A lot of these questions that astronomy is trying to answer, I find a lot of these answers to these questions in the Kumulipo, our creation story, where in our worldview, we were not the center. We are part of all things, and all things is a part of us. So our worldview doesn't revolve around us as human beings. It revolves around everything that gives us life. And everything in this universe gives life. And so everything is sacred. We are made up of everything. So we are sacred. Take your power back. And know that. You are part of all things. We are not separate. I am a part of you. You are a part of me. We are just the dust of the most infinite, the most high. And we are just here to learn. And so thank you. So thank you for this opportunity to learn from one another, to hear each other speak. And for a space like this, I ask that we are open and willing to come from our hearts and come from our na'au, come from our bowl. Because that is the gift. That is a gift of exchange. And here we are exchanging and breathing life into this very room, speaking and uttering the word Mauna'au Wakea. Wakea is an incredible expanse. There's so many meanings to Mauna Kea and Mauna'au Wakea and Wakea. So many meanings that I cannot convey them just in English. But one word that encompasses Wakea is infinite. Infinite. And that is who we descend from. The infinite. The ancient ones. And in this, we find ourselves and we come back to ourselves. We come back to who we are when we go back to the earth, when we go back to the water that feeds us, when we plant, and when we eat of the food. And when we do this with honor, when we don't just take for the sake of taking, but we learn the exchange of giving, and giving with honor, and with gratitude, and with grace. This mountain is calling now, and I feel it, and we can all feel it, because the world feels it. The eyes of the world are watching now. The eyes of the world are watching and feeling the call of the mountain too. The call of the water. Our people didn't just look at the stars and observe them and try to capture images of them. Our people had a relationship, and still do have a relationship in an exchange. And that exchange teaches us how to navigate oceans, when to plant our food, when to step into the ocean, and when not to. This realm is a great teacher. And if you look, Mauna Kea, before any of that construction, there wasn't very many archaeological finds there. Archaeological finds, artifacts, shrines. Because that place is a temple in itself. That place is sacred. And we actually weren't allowed to go all the way to the top. But in this time, we are called to do so, to protect our sacred place. In the past years, our people have suffered great oppression, depression. And so maybe we all couldn't come out from Mauna Kea at that time because there were so many other things that were happening. We lost our language. It was stripped from us. Our land was stolen from us. We were tricked out of our land. We were tricked and taken advantage of. And so that is why maybe you didn't see the tens of thousands coming out back then, but there were other issues that they were standing for, and those telescopes went up very quietly. But from the very beginning, there was resistance, and I want to breathe that into this room. From the very beginning, whether it was 1 or 2, they came with their 40, their 400, their 4,000, their 40,000, their 400,000. They came with their ancestors. And so now we're coming by the millions. And we are here as First Nations people, to stand up now. It's our time. And it's the time for all of us. Because this issue isn't about just Kanaka Ulithi, it's not just about Hawaiians. If you drink water, this issue is relevant to you. So think about that. Do you know where your water comes from? In this district, your water comes from Mauna Awakia, down into these streams, down into these rivers. The place that they're bombing, Pohakuloa, that is an aquifer that holds ancient water from Mauna Kea. That snow, the purest form of water, comes down into that aquifer. And so this is not just about Mauna Kea, but this is about taking back our power. And if we call ourselves leaders, if we have to call ourselves leaders now in this movement and in this time, then what I learned, what a leader is, and measured by, is how well you serve the people and how well you serve and manage the land. And so I cannot look at our leaders right now in leadership positions and say that they are true because of the way they are managing our resources and serving the people. The world is calling out now to protect Mauna Kea, and yet our own government does not listen to that. The world, not just Hawaii and not just Hawaiians. And so this is a time for all Native people, and we are all Native to somewhere. All of us are Native to somewhere. So if you're not Native to here, I hope you know your roots. I hope you know where you come from, where your ancestors come from. I do, because I know many of you were stripped of that. Many of you were stripped of that privilege and honor of knowing where you come from. And so I hope that you get to learn that. Because as a woman, as a Kanaka Oiwi of this land, I know where I come from. And it is a beautiful feeling to know that this land right here was once walked by my ancestors. This water was once cared for by my blood relations. It is a good feeling to know that. And so I wish that for all of you that don't know that. I truly do from my heart. Because I think and I believe then we will be able to have a real exchange, a real conversation, because you will know what raised you, what and who raised you. You will know your wind, you will know your water, you will know your mountain, and we can come together in that way, in the way of the world, in the way of the land, in the way of the native. And so here and now, we get to make that change together. What is sustainable for our island communities now? What decisions are we making? And who's making the decisions for us? Ovai, ovaia, ovaila, ovaila hoi. Peheala hoi. Who is that? And how come we gave them that power if they are misusing it? It's our time now. It's our time to look at this earth because the earth is suffering. Our waters are suffering. Our land is racked with chemicals. We are not an experimental site. We are not a place to come and experiment. We are living, and we are still a living people here. So what kind of future are we creating for the next 7 generations? Will they have clean water? Will they have a mountain to call home in their heart and in their wombs and bodies? Will they have fresh food? Food that has not been demeaned? Food that still has its integrity? Will our oceans survive? Because what happens on that mountain happens to our ocean. And look at the state of our oceans. Everything is connected. Everything is connected. And we are not the center of that. And we are not the center of the universe. So how can we step out of that worldview that we have been taught and come back to what community means? What does a community really mean? To speak the truth, to speak from your heart, to speak with kindness, and to come into this wanting to really work out the problems, wanting to really hear each other, really hear each other. That is this time, the time of the changing waters. And so now, we can help our leaders make decisions, assist them in that, by rising up for what is right for us, and our children, and right for our land. Another building on the Mauna is not right for our land right now. An 18-story building with a footprint of 9 acres is not right for our water right now. It is not right for our basic being here on this earth. Before we look out, because I always say they're like really big cameras on a mountain. And although there might be beautiful things that come out of this science, it's not a sustainable science and it's not a clean science because there are chemicals in these telescopes. And there has been spills and there is waste. So do not tell me that it is a clean science because I know that it is not. Do not demean our education and our worldview and our higher education as Native people. Because we are born with a higher education. We are born from scientists that knew of the all, not just of the one. It's a gentleman's science. It's a privileged science. And it's a science that not all benefit from. And so it's about choosing. What science do we support? Because I am a supporter of science and I do believe in science because I am born of that. I am part of 2 particles made into a miracle. We are all miracles. So what is sustainable science? Is that GMOs? Is that depleted uranium all over Pahakuloa? Is that a 30-meter telescope on our mountain? Is that sonar in our oceans? Ole. It's not that. And we, as Hawaiian people, have been deemed lazy and stupid. No, we were suffering in a deep depression with post-traumatic disorder and intergenerational trauma. And so many in the world suffer from these things. And so how can we come together and heal those things? It's not by continuing to build and destruct the earth that raised us and continues to raise us. We will only find respect for the earth and respect for each other and respect for ourselves if we return to the land, return to the water, return to the mountains. You want higher education, that's where it is.
Yep.
That is where it is. And so I find this process very disturbing, but you know what? I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for the TMT and this whole thing that has happened because it's awakening our people. And it's awakening people around the world to stand with Hawaii this time. We are small, but we are mighty. And this force is rising. It's rising. And now we have people of all colors, all backgrounds, all beliefs, standing with us and saying, we are Mauna Kea. We are Mauna Kea. That is a huge statement to make. We are infinite. And we are not defeated. Although Governor Ige has made his announcement, he made that out of fear, and I have compassion for him. I do. Because he doesn't know what he's doing. Because he's fearful of the repercussions that may come from a billion-dollar corporation. But you cannot buy us off with $1 million a year. That's pennies. That's pennies.
In 11 years.
Oh, in 11 years. Oh, come on. Pennies. You're a billion-dollar corporation. If you really want to help us, then give us all that money that you were gonna use to build the TMT and help us get our land back. Buy us the land back. Help us know our water again and know our stream beds. Because you cannot force STEM education into our schools when our students are suffering from that same PTSD and don't even understand some of the concepts that STEM is bringing to us. Don't insult us. Stop insulting us. Because this time we're not taking it. But that doesn't mean we don't aloha you and have compassion for you. Because you, these astronomers, are trying to look for something outside themselves, trying to discover things. That word discover is so hilarious to me. I crack up because I'm like, how do you think that you can discover anything out there? That made you. Time to bow down and know where your roots are, where you're from. Respect. Yo, uncle, have some respect. Have some respect for this land and for the knowledge of this land, because if you took some time to talk to us, we could answer some of your questions. We could even quote them out of the Kumulipo, our creation story. If you just talk to us, we would think about sharing with you. Don't insult us. But stand and have a real conversation with us. Because a lot of these talks I've been hearing with astronomers is talking about, oh, this is what the TMT can do, and oh, this is what the TMT will do, and this is how much money we are giving to you, and this is how many jobs we'll give to you and your community. We are doing this for you. No, you're not. You're doing this for you.
And money.
So you can discover something. But I wish you could know that the universe is inside you. All the answers that you want to know, that's inside of you already. That's why our people already knew about that. But there was no conversation. Not an open one. Where you really came into a conversation actually wanting compromise. You want us to compromise. Like we have in the past. There is no compromise in this particular movement right now because we haven't been shown compromise or grace or respect. But that doesn't mean, again, that we come at you without aloha. That doesn't mean that. But aloha also means to speak the truth and be in a firm commitment to the truth and to justice, to what is right. And this is not right. And the TMT Corporation says that they've consulted with the people. I didn't get consulted.
Me neither.
Who got consulted in this group? Ovailaya. Oh.
Wally Ishibashi.
Did they consult the people? Leaders, did they consult the people? No. How are they in service to us? How well are they managing our lands? They want to go and detonate and bomb our mountain so that they can secure this telescope. And it's not a sensitive area. It's not a sensitive area. I've been on that place. I know that place. I've held ceremony with my family on that place for the past 7 years. Shrines that once stood for my kupuna, our kupuna, the kupuna of this land, no longer are standing. And Ahu, a shrine that we built on that land, was taken down. So if you respect us and want to have a conversation with us, then why did you take down our sacred things and not include that in those reports? How come? Pehea. Anukeaha. Nukeaha laia. Why? It's a contradiction because we've been waiting for decommissioning for a long time, and that's been promised for a long time, and they're saying, oh, when the TMT is built, we will decommission. Please, again, do not insult us.
Right. It's been happening.
Because that wasn't done yet. They actually built instead of decommissioned. So, don't be surprised when we say we cannot trust you.
Fork tongue.
But again, that doesn't mean we don't have aloha for you. Because we do. But aloha, there's a misconception about aloha. Do not take my aloha for weakness. Because we are born of also warriors.
Absolutely.
And now we are rising as warriors of peace. Peace for our mountain are sacred things. But we are fierce. We are fierce in our love for our land, for our mauna, for our next 7 generations, for our water. So don't believe everything that you hear. Research. Talk to the people before you make your conclusions, before you make decisions. I'm speaking to everyone, community members, before you make your decision about this particular issue. Come, speak with us. We are more than willing to have this conversation from the heart, from the soul, from the womb, from the water. We are willing. Please talk with us. Get to know us and get to know why we care so much about this place. Get to know us, because when you get to know us, you get to know where we come from. And where we come from is a beautiful, sacred land. Where we come from is of the infinite, divine. It's who we are. This mountain is who we are. This mountain has raised us. We're lucky to be alive and lucky to know that, because it's a beautiful time to be alive. So I'm asking you to come and join us and have this conversation and feel the land and let the land help you to come back into who you are. Let the land help you to decide what your stance is on this particular issue. You can listen to the words for days and days. You can read for days and days. But when you go to the land and let the land speak to your heart and to your soul, then that's when you know. And so, come and stand with us. Come and join us. Bring your 40, 4,000, 40,000, 400,000. Bring them with you. And let us unite in all realms. All realms. And may you know that you are infinite. And you are born of all things. From my heart to your heart. Kealohanui. From my bowl to your bowl. Kealohanui. From my water to your water. Kealohanui. My beloved Hawaii, Mama Gagawa, stand with this beloved Eku Aina, for our beloved land. This is the dawn for the native of this land. For my Hawaii, I will give my all.
Kaleva here, you had something short, bro. I mean, don't go on for a long time, okay, because we're at the
Yeah,
hour.
but I got it as short as I can because to me, what I get, everybody need to know what it's all about up the mountain. And I feel like it's coming straight from here to here to you. Okay? My name is Kaleva here. You know, in Hawaiian Jack, we live by what our name is all about. My name is Kaleva here. Okay, Kaya. My family line comes from high priest line. Okay? I'm not a high priest, but I get plenty juice for sure. Because my inside is the kind that can make us all grow. But first of all, you gotta know where you at. You're in Akua Hali on earth. Okay? Get me clear now. When he put us here in the middle of nowhere, we don't come to Allah. Believe me, this was a beautiful thing for the whole world because now the world will know what is the heart in this world body system of humanity. Okay? Otherwise, let's put here for only one reason. Okay? And that reason is to show the world how to live Pono and Aloha and Malama. Daina. Everything will come natural after that. But we gotta, number one, when you stay in his house, you gotta respect number one first. When you get up in the morning, the light you see is that light of your breath of life that you gotta acknowledge in the Hawaiian way. That's number one you acknowledge. Then number two, Raina. Then number two, gee, the Kanaka. Now you may be, okay? But now, that mountain up there is the temple of Kani and his 3 sons that connect us right around the globe. Let me show you how it works. Okay? Kani is our North Star and he's God, you. Okay, Akua. And the North Star is right over Hawaii. Okay? So this is his honey. If you guys understand the Kumulipo, the chant of creation, you guys gonna understand. We important people, we here to set an example. 300 years ago, this is when America was exposed to the world. And 300 years ago, we was exposed to the outside world. Okay? Now I'll let you guys understand one thing. What you think, Akua, when bringing a 2 superpower, I look at them as a 2 superpower, Ku and Lono. Why I'm telling you this is because Ku, he represents the West, Europe. What he represents? Physical, mind, war. And they upkeep the war too. Okay? They are for upkeep the law. Positive side. No, it's the Paul. They tell it, of life. As in the ancient continent. Us guys, we come from the Polynesian Triangle. Yeah, that's kind of lost. East and West. I call them right and right. Okay? They gotta know they brought us. So I brought them here for fighting war. They could have been to their mother, but it never happened that way. He wanted them to come here in his house. So the world can know who is he up there. But you see, culture to pull the world together with his sons. That is why we was put here in the world. And you guys gotta understand, America is part of this culture, but America is using the heart in a wrong way. Let's pull the world together, but do us right. Then America don't have to be like Rome, you know. Rome went down because no more spiritual fighting, no more spiritual honor in that country. But America, they get it right here from us. This is why you guys, you outsiders that came from outside. If you guys Travis came 300 years ago, believe me, it was a close wheel for them to come here, make kids, and build up some paradise product with us. Okay? Yes. Now, all I know is, all I can say to them, wake up. Let the heart breathe. You know what I mean? Huh? And you bow in the east, and you physical nature in the west. America. You guys gotta hook up with us, kind of low, and make the world know how we're gonna fix it. Because when they put us here in the middle of nowhere, nobody on us. Only a corner. No land based on us for make them ownership like America. Come on. Come on, you guys, wake up. You like pull the world together? Huh? Then you know what? Huh? No way, I said. Please, no. You're in a world highly on earth. This is why we have a culture called. That's all I like.
Thank you, ladies, both of you, for your clarity and passion about that conversation. You made this evening much richer, both of you. Thank you. I didn't get any questions on that side. I do have a couple of questions that I will pose and share with the group so they can deal with it later. The questions about other science who don't necessarily agree with this science and would like to be a part of this conversation. I think that's a good thing to take home with you and think about in your next session. I'd like just to wrap it up and to thank the people, thank the Hilo Hamakua Community Development Corps for putting this on, to Peter, Mike, and to Ruth and Havana for their contributions tonight, and to all of you for caring enough to come tonight and to bring your spirit and your aloha to this session. This has been a fine way to exchange ideas. I thank you very much.
Yes.
Please stick around and eat. There is some food here. That's a good way to end the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And our next two sessions are back on Tuesdays, and they are back in Lapahoehoe in the cafeteria at the school there. And, you know, we've discussed having additional sessions. So we welcome everybody's input and everybody's thoughts on how to make these better sessions. So mahalo, everybody.
Very good.
con pueblos